I appreciate all of you being here. This is just such an excitement in the room. I can just feel the energy. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint presentation. And I have to tell you, it's been an exciting week here. Was in Malmö, Sweden yesterday, doing a roundtable discussion. Yes, if you can pull that up, that'd be great. Doing a roundtable discussion about what is driving workplace change and what's it going to look like in the year 2020, which isn't that far away, is it? You know, think about that. Oh, we're getting older as we speak. But again, it's fabulous to have the opportunity. Thank you, Paige. To have the opportunity to look at some of the things that are influencing our resistance to change. Looking at a certain perspective, but we're going to try to get some interaction from the audience as well so that we can hear some of your thoughts. I think one of the many, many benefits of being in front of diverse groups is hearing, you know, are there new issues emerging that are really going to challenge our success with implementing new workplace strategies. I do want to let you know that you're going to have a chance to win a copy of my book, which is Innovations in Office Design, The Critical Influence Approach to Effective Work Environments. And we're going to have a bag going around right now. So if you have a business card you'd like to put in the bag, we'll pick a name a little later on for a copy of the book. So some of the different concepts that we're going to talk about here tonight have been drawn from the book and the research that my firm has done. Why is change management such a timely topic? You know, big question. We've been talking about change management for at least 20 years. You know, people used to think of change management more relative to information technology. Implementing new technology, how do we get the computer people there to help people change their behaviors with how they're using the new equipment. 17 years ago, when Paige and I were working together in the US and talking about resistance to workplace change, there were still a lot of people scratching their heads and saying, what are you talking about? Right? I mean, it was frustrating, you know, trying to help people understand that there were things getting in the way of us adopting workplace change. But I'd like to hear from you, what are some of the issues that you think are driving workplace change, and what are those challenges? And I open it up, and I want to make sure I'm learning from you. What are some of the challenges that you're feeling or witnessing as it relates to workplace change? They don't think that change will be any better. So why is that? What is their perception of why change is going to happen then?
Lots of reasons why. I think it's changing economic circumstances being a good one at the moment. But I think a lot of people worry that it's going to be badly managed, badly implemented, and that's what I think worries me.
It worries people that change will be very poorly implemented. You know, I'm hearing there can be change of the month. You didn't say that, but you know, if you're in the corporation, it's like, okay, now what's going to be the next change you're going to ask me to make? So change is not connected to each other. We're not connecting the dots for people. What are some of the other issues or challenges? Yes?
People often have an authority, a hierarchy structure within their organization. They're worried that change will threaten their position within that structure.
So within the corporate hierarchy, we may be threatened by change. Gee, you know, if we're doing this certain thing, you know, am I losing my power? Do I feel I'm losing my power, or am I actually losing my power and authority? Is workplace change being driven because we're really downsizing and we're not telling anybody yet? Lots of issues like that, lots of fears. Other challenges or issues, yes?
People feel they're not going to be engaged with that change, that will be done to them rather than with them.
Very good point. People feel that change is going to be done to them rather than having them be a part of it, being engaged. We see that all the time. Yes, did I see a hand?
Yeah, I see the resistance to change is huge and it's across a whole range of reasons for it. And I think it's because people, sometimes it's the management of a company that finds itself in a position where it's got to do change and it's got to be done because their lease is up and they've only got 8 weeks, and then you haven't really got the time to do a proper change process. And I've seen a lot of companies try to implement alternative workplace scenarios, and it's down to lack of communication, it's down to not enough time, not the right people involved. So I think it's a huge range.
Huge range. So the communication or lack of communication, the lack of time
Yeah.
to appropriately lead people through change. You know, even if you know you can't resist it, it still takes time to get used to it. You still want to know. Yes, Paige.
I would say just a general lack of trust.
Lack of trust. Lack of trust. Is it the employees lacking the trust, managers lacking the trust, or both? Both. Good.
Both ways, yeah.
We'll be talking about employees. I want to make sure that I point out at least my viewpoint that when we talk about employees, you need to remember that everybody that's employed by the organization is an employee, including your CEO that may have fears that you'll never hear about. I guarantee, that's not going to make it down through the grapevine. But we take a look at what are those issues, what's going on in people's heads when they're hearing about the rumors about change, and when they're actually hearing announcements, and then when they hear changes about the changes. One more comment?
It's also the drivers for change.
Drivers of change, yes.
You know,
Yeah.
if the drivers are honest, if it's purely let's cut costs and stick everyone in open plan, it's not going to be a success.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's actually trying to make it so that it works for the organisation, is a very different driver. And so if you get the drivers right.
Absolutely. So what are the drivers of change, and is it purely cost cutting? I will say one thing, saving money is not a bad thing. We hear this from employees more at the lower level, that the company's only trying to save money. That is not a bad thing. If the company is financially strong, there are more benefits that can be provided for employees. There's new positions that can be hired, so it's not one person doing the job of 2 people that we've witnessed so much after the financial challenges that we've had in the past couple of years. So when we're communicating workplace change, we don't want to apologize for the fact that, what we're planning to do will save money. Other benefits we're going to tell you about, but don't apologize for saving money. It is not a bad thing. Well, let's see if we captured some of the things we talked about here. Just business issues. And I'll point out that a lot of these are about saving money. Not a bad thing. What are organizations doing? Downsizing, restructuring, realigning. They're closing facilities or consolidating unprofitable facilities. We've seen that so much in North America, that companies had downsized so many employees, and if they have 14 buildings scattered throughout the area, they have building with 20 people working here and 100 people working here and 50 people working here. So as leases are expiring, they're saying, it's like, wait a minute, we don't need all these buildings. Let's put the people together to save money, but also to get people to communicate and get engaged, of course. Companies want to operate more productively with fewer resources. In any organization, resources are limited. There's only so many people who can do the work, only so much budgets to allocate to different cool projects that everybody wants their budget for their initiative. There's only so much to go around. Organizations want to reduce the energy consumption through a corporate-wide green initiative, so whether they're going for certification or just wanting to be good to the environment, it's a business issue. It's driving some of the decisions. Sometimes it's also saving money. Some organizations are mandating shorter work weeks, instituting telework programs or alternative workplace strategies. And when we talk about alternative workplace strategies, I know that's a term, you mentioned it this evening, but it's not, I don't think it's as commonly used in Europe as it is in the US. To definition, alternative workplace strategies, people picking and choosing where they're working. It could be in the corporate office, it could be in the corporate cafeteria, it could be from home, closely aligned with activity-based work settings. Looking at that utilization of space and refining the workplace strategy based on actual usage, not based on how people are reporting. Oh, I need to have a private office and I need to be in it, 5 days solid a week. Doesn't happen. So looking at the utilization from, a measurement using the technology that can come up with the data. Breaking the ratio of 1-to-1, one person to one workspace. Moving managers from private offices to an open work environment. That's a big one we see. Transitioning staff from a dedicated to shared or unassigned workspaces. We recently finished a project with Philips Electronics North America in their headquarters where they totally did away with any assigned spaces. And they had been in very conventional offices. Took a while to get used to. And lastly, offering low-cost employee perks to sort of offset. Providing some of the perks and benefits to employees can be very costly, and as companies are trying to save money, again, not a bad thing, what are some of those perks? Working from home could be a relatively low-cost option that's offered. That covers a number of the things we mentioned here. And let's look at some of the trends or issues that are not so much about saving money as much as it is about increasing productivity and engagement of the workforce. Such as increasing productivity through teamwork and collaboration regardless of the location. Obviously, technology is going to allow us to do a lot of that, but are we going to really be able to sustain the corporate culture? And that's an issue that's a lot of executives worry about. If we have people working at home or much more distributed, are they going to feel like they're part of the organization? We want to improve employee morale. It's just not to make people feel better and be happy. People that are engaged in their work are more productive, and some of the studies, not that Stegmeier Consulting Group has done, but some of the studies I've read about, that individuals that are ranked very highly with employee engagement are members of organizations that often have very high customer service or customer satisfaction scores. So organizations are focused on how we're going to get engagement up so that we can make our clients more happy.
Diane, what do you define as productivity?
Productivity, we're going to get into in much more detail, but we take a look at either the time someone takes to do something or increasing the outputs. I'm going to give you some very, very specific examples in a little bit. Okay. Provide staffs more choices and control to balance work-life. Work-life balance is so out of whack if you think about that with the time we spend commuting. Really being engaged with our careers, but still you've got a family, you've got friends, you want to be able to maybe take a class, and doing all that is just so difficult. So having an organization that really stands behind work-life balance and has the policies in place to support that, we're finding those are the employers that are attracting talent. But you also using the workplace to attract and inspire people, using the workplace as a magnet that people want to come into the office, not that they have to come into the office. Increasing organizational innovation. You think about how competitive the work world is, and if you're not out there coming out with something new, well, your competition is. So, you look at how many organizations have gone out of business over the past 3 years with the way the economy has been in different countries. It's frightening. So organizations are saying, how can we be lean and mean? How can we empower our people to come up with better ideas? But at the same time, the employees are worried about my boss doesn't trust me, and I'm gonna put in the hours, and I don't have work-life balance. So there's all these conflicts out there. Accommodate the multi-generational workforce. You've got 4 generations in the workforce. We think that they're totally different from each other. I found one common thread, and I think it's an important one, that I've seen amongst all the generations want an increase in work-life balance. As an example, you've seen so many baby boomers that may have been eligible to retire in the past couple of years, and with the way the economy has impacted their retirement savings, that some of those people that would have retired are hanging on to their jobs. They're contributing to the success of the organization, but they thought that at that point in time they would have been out golfing 3 days a week, and they would have been playing with the grandchildren, they would have been having a picnic. Those individuals want work-life balance. So they would like the flexibility of saying, hey, I only want to work 4 days a week. I want to work out of my home, so maybe I can do some of these other things. And then the younger generations are saying, I want to make a difference. I'm not looking for a job that I'm just going to get a paycheck. I want to feel like I'm making a difference to society. Having work-life balance, you can do that a little better because you can choose some of those causes that you want to volunteer your time, in addition to having a very full career. Enhance employee access to company information where and when they need it. Okay, we have technology where you should be able to access. If I'm in front of a client and the client's asking me about some research statistics from a study, and it's like, well, I know it's on our share drive. I should be able to get it. I could get it. However, my boss doesn't really trust me because, I might leave the company and go to the competition, so they're not going to allow me to access the information that's going to help the client, that's going to help us get the sale. It's true. We've got this technology, but do we really trust the employees? Heaven forbid. They might actually try to use the information to help somebody. It's frustrating. Reinforce the corporate values of trust. Paige, you said it, lack of trust coming up, going down. The workforce is so distributed and getting even more so, and if we can't trust, we hear this all the time with clients. Well, how are we going to know if they're working flexibly from home? Well, how are you going to know if they're working if they're in the office? Because they're probably playing on the computer when you're walking by and it looks like they're working on that report. If you don't trust the people, why are those people working for you? Or will you ever find people that are going to be, you're going to 100% trust? We look at trust as being one of the key elements that employee engagement is measured on. You seeing a connection here? Seeing a connection. Improve decision making at the front line. Why is that important? Well, with the downsizing, you might have had 8 layers in the organization, now you only have 5. That manager can't make all the decisions. You want the decision making being closest to the customer, so the closest to the person that is dealing with the problem or the issue. We need people to be able to think on their feet and make decisions at an appropriate level for their education and their place in the company. Challenging managers to focus on the results rather than on the tasks of their direct reports. Do we really care if someone's in the office for 37 and a half hours in the week? Yeah, but I think we should care about, did they finish that report? Did they attend that meeting? Did they invest in some education that they were supposed to do? Did they finish all the things they were supposed to do? Did they mentor their peers? Did they advance the organization in any way by coming up with new ideas? No, we just want to see Paige came in 2 minutes late and we're going to mark that down on her chart. Who cares? We need to focus on the right things. Tying hand in hand, enforce accountability at all levels. Has anybody been involved in a workplace transformation process project where managers weren't held accountable for making sure that the people really adopted change? Or I should say, has anybody been in an engagement that people were held accountable? You know, we put these plans in for the new workplace transformation and a new work environment, and we hope, with our fingers crossed, that the managers are going to hold themselves accountable and their people. And nobody's pushing for that. We need to make sure people are accountable. So if you look at the left-hand side, the business issues that I said are mostly about reducing cost. We're looking at the right-hand side, which is more about the productivity and increasing that. We often think they're at odds and they're conflicting. And when we go in with a new client, ordinarily someone from real estate or facilities will pull us in on a workplace project. But then we're closely working with human resources and we see these people don't talk to each other. And how can you begin to realize that working together you can solve each other's challenges? Because in many cases, having a good, strong workplace strategy that includes emphasis on the workforce is going to accomplish things from both sides of the equation. Paige, when she invited me to be here, and I agreed to come and chat a little bit about some of the highlights of my research on resistance to workplace change. Really started 17 years ago, back when we said people are starting to talk about change management, not really understanding how to do it or what to do about it. At the time, I was working in the workplace industry, in the contract furniture world, and I would see these great projects where the appropriate workplace solution was in place, but when you walked through the space, people weren't using it. Now, how many of you were in the workplace world 17 years ago? I know there's some people that haven't been around that long, but 17 years ago,
Is that all?
17 years and then some. So 17 years ago, the conversations were about we have to have teamwork and collaboration. Those were brand new words. They thought they invented them then. They were challenged with getting people to mentor each other. They were challenged with getting people to interface spontaneously as well as in a structured fashion to increase innovation and innovative outputs for the organization. They're still struggling with it, and they're still talking about it like it's brand new. You know, we're going to have a collaborative work environment. That's good, but do people take the time to define collaboration for that particular organization? So over the 17 years, my firm worked with and studied more than 140 organizations. I intentionally wanted to look at diverse industries. Because as we talk to clients about resistance to change, one of the first things that a client will say is, well, you don't understand because we're the financial industry. Or, you don't understand because we're the healthcare industry. Or we're the manufacturing industry. Well, guess what? What's the common thread between those industries? People. They all employ people. So what we were learning through these years was like, gee, there's some commonality here. It doesn't really matter where you're located or how big your company is. You all have people working for you. So it was all about examining resistance to workplace change. Now, workplace change to one person can be something as simple as sort of shrinking the footprint of your office. For somebody else, it's like doing away with assigned offices or totally working from home. The resistance and the degree of change is in the eye of the beholder, right? You know, how big of a change is that to you? And to reemphasize, this was about examination of the appropriate workplace solution. I'm going to say that again. This was looking at the appropriate workplace solution. So if it was meant to be a collaborative environment, it was. They had the team spaces, they had the spaces for concentration. Everything was addressed appropriately, but people were not working. The collaborative areas were empty. You know, they had the magazines fanned out there, and you know, they were collecting dust. And back at that time, they started having the cappuccino makers in the break area, and people were not working there. You know, they had the stand-up pub tables and the whiteboards there, but people wouldn't be caught dead working there. Why? Looking a little too casual in the workplace?
Culturally,
Right.
it wasn't
Yeah.
I'm not at my desk, I'm not working.
If I'm not at my desk, I'm not working. So, you know, it's like the whiteboard didn't even have any shadow marks on it. It was like it was never used. And companies were trying to use the workplace to attract and retain, you know, the best of the best employees. So HR would be out there on the corporate campuses doing the recruiting, and they'd convince a young talented person come in for an interview, and they had the brochure with the picture of the workplace. Wow, this looks pretty cool. And they come in, and that person sees the space not being used, and the only sounds were muffled executives behind closed doors talking. I thought, this is just for show. You know, what is this, a furniture showroom? You know, things are like perfectly aligned, but nobody's using them. And to me, that was so frustrating, because at the time, I had access to senior level people and asking, you know, how do you like your new workplace? It's like, well, I don't think we really got our money out of this because we're not using it. So I set out to find out what was getting in the way of the appropriate workplace solution. And we began to uncover certain things, and really came up with a list of 15 factors, tangible and intangible, come to be known as critical influences. So these are factors that impact behavior in the workplace, good and bad, success of the workplace strategy, but from a very broad picture, if people are doing their jobs, if they're engaged, if they're trusted, if they're really giving it their all, these behavioral factors are going to ultimately dictate whether or not the company achieves organizational results. Are you going to meet your sales numbers, your marketing numbers? Are you going to, you know, invent that new release of the software? Whatever it is, these factors seem to be getting in the way in many, many organizations, and I won't hold the suspense here. Here are the 15 critical influences. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here, but I will point out that I intentionally have put the physical and virtual workplace last. Not that it's the least important, because it's probably the most important to us here in the room. How many architects do we have in the room? Who do we have? Architectural, interior design, workplace furniture industry, building products. I mean, you know, very, very commonalities in terms, we want the workplace to be the right solution, and we want to make sure that the client's getting the results that they want. So that is certainly an important factor. We're assuming that the solution's right for the client. If it's not, it could be because one of the 14 other factors is getting in the way. Conversely, you can get alignment with all these other factors, and if the solution's wrong, you know what, it's not going to guide the behavior the way it could. Let's give you a couple of examples here. Rewards and consequences. Let's take a look at that. Let's just say in a more open environment, meant for collaboration, the organization realizes that people still need concentrated work. You're not collaborating all the time. So if I work in that office, I have, you know, I'm using a benching system for most of the day, and there's some phone booths to take the private calls. I also have some focus booths where if you have concentrated work, you can go in there and not be disturbed. So let's say that Diane in the afternoon finds the concentrated work to be, that's when I'm really thinking well. So every afternoon I pick a focus booth and I sit in there, and I'm really super productive. I understand how my mind works and when I'm freshest, so I really am productive. So I just happen to get in the routine a little bit of doing that at the same time every day. Well, if I come out of the focus booth, and I'm really excited, of course, because I've made some breakthrough in something I'm working on, and I come out and my boss says, "So, Diane, how was your nap?" The consequence of me using the space as it's intended is going to result in what? You know, if you're an average employee, how would I respond to that? You're not going to use the space. Okay? We're not going to use the space. We see that all the time with organizations that have telework or flex work programs, that the employees working home on Tuesday and they come in the office and the boss, it's bad enough if your peers tease you, but if your boss says, "So, how was your day off?" What in the world are they trying to do? You know, we're not holding managers accountable for making that space work well, yet their employer, you know, all the people's employer, the company, has invested money in that perfect solution. Technology. That's relatively straightforward. If you've got the technology, or the lack of technology, I should say, where you don't have a mobile phone, you don't have a following function, and you're in a workstation and you're tethered to it because of a landline, how in the world are you going to be using all these other spaces? You know, you're going to be like running back there because you're waiting for a call, or you know, or wanting to make sure that you don't miss out on something that is important and timely. Culture. Has anybody witnessed culture getting in the way of workplace change? Oh my gosh. Who is the person in the typical organization that understands culture the least? Who understands culture the least in an organization?
Do you mean the formal culture or the informal culture?
Either one. Who is the most blind about what the culture really is?
The boss.
The boss. And similar, I'm going to use the example, the CEO. If you're working in a large organization and you get on the elevator and the CEO is in the elevator, it's like, oh, you want me to talk? Well, he or she asks you, "So, how's everything going?" What are you going to answer? Great, everything's wonderful, blah, blah, blah. You're going to make up something. You had a perfect opportunity to talk about something that's not working well and getting in the way, and we don't, the technology's not keeping up with the way that our new structure, blah, blah, blah. That CEO is clueless about what the culture's all about. Is it a territorial culture? Is it one that is focused more on the older generations and making the younger people feel like they're not contributing? Whatever that culture is, that individual, is clueless, and they care. They really care. They want the right culture, but they don't know what the reality is. Often when we're doing change readiness assessments at the beginning of a project and show the results to the executives, it's like, no, you're kidding. You are kidding. Or they say, yeah, we sort of suspected that, but what are we going to do about it? It's just very, very difficult. One element on here, now I'd love to go through all these elements, but I'm told that I don't have that much time. Compensation. That's the one that people scratch their head. It's like, what? What does compensation have to do with accepting workplace change? Any thoughts on that? It's probably the most perplexing for people.
Well, one would hope that if you're going to save a load of money by increasing productivity and reducing real estate costs, some of that benefit might be shared with the employees. I've never known it happen.
You don't see it very often. I did see something like that with one organization that had a little bucket of money that the manager could use to purchase something for the department if they complied with the new workplace plan. So it wasn't personal, it was sort of departmental. But in terms of compensating
Bribery.
each person,
Bribery.
bribery. Maybe we need 16 influences here. Compensation. Most of us are paid the same way our parents or grandparents were paid. We're paid as individuals. Okay, so what? Take that a step further. What are we asking people to do? We want you to work in the collaborative environment, and we want to share your, Diane, you've got good ideas. You share. Tell all these people so that they can be successful. Oh, great. You can take my idea and do something with it, and you're going to get the credit, which is a reward. Why in the world would I do that? Why would I mentor someone new into the company? Because, you know, I sort of think this workplace change is all about cost cutting. You're probably going to reduce my job or eliminate this, and why should I help anybody? You know, knowledge is power. Knowledge. So the compensation, while we're not suggesting any of you should become compensation specialists, because I'm certainly not, we've recognized that as being an issue that can get in the way. And because we're working on the people side of the workplace change, and we're working with human resource executives, like, I appreciate all of you being here. This is just such an excitement in the room. I can just feel the energy. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint presentation. And I have to tell you, it's been an exciting week here. Was in Malmö, Sweden yesterday, doing a roundtable discussion. Yes, if you can pull that up, that'd be great. Doing a roundtable discussion about what is driving workplace change and what's it going to look like in the year 2020, which isn't that far away, is it? You know, think about that. Oh, we're getting older as we speak. But again, it's fabulous to have the opportunity. Thank you, Paige. To have the opportunity to look at some of the things that are influencing our resistance to change. Looking at a certain perspective, but we're going to try to get some interaction from the audience as well, so that we can hear some of your thoughts. I think one of the many benefits of being in front of diverse groups is hearing, you know, are there new issues emerging that are really going to challenge our success with implementing new workplace strategies. I do want to let you know that you're going to have a chance to win a copy of my book, which is Innovations in Office Design, The Critical Influence Approach to Effective Work Environments. And we're going to have a bag going around right now. So if you have a business card you'd like to put in the bag, we'll pick a name a little later on for a copy of the book. So some of the different concepts that we're going to talk about here tonight have been drawn from the book and the research that my firm has done. Why is change management such a timely topic? You know, big question. We've been talking about change management for at least 20 years. You know, people used to think of change management more relative to information technology. Implementing new technology, how do we get the computer people there to help people change their behaviors with how they're using the new equipment. 17 years ago, when Paige and I were working together in the US and talking about resistance to workplace change, there were still a lot of people scratching their heads and saying, what are you talking about? Right? I mean, it was frustrating, you know, trying to help people understand that there were things getting in the way of us adopting workplace change. But I'd like to hear from you, what are some of the issues that you think are driving workplace change, and what are those challenges? And I open it up, and I want to make sure I'm learning from you. What are some of the challenges that you're feeling or witnessing as it relates to workplace change?
Well, it seems to me there's a lot of people who are resistant, possibly because they don't think the change is going to be any better.
They don't think that change will be any better. So why is that? What is their perception of why change is going to happen then?
There are lots of reasons why. I think it's changing economic circumstances being one at the moment. But I think a lot of people worry that it's going to be badly managed, badly implemented, and that's what I think worries me.
It worries people that change will be very poorly implemented. I'm hearing there can be change of the month. You didn't say that, but if you're in the corporation, it's like, okay, now what's going to be the next change you're going to ask me to make? So change is not connected to each other. We're not connecting the dots for people. What are some of the other issues or challenges? Yes.
People often have an authority, a hierarchy structure within their organisation.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried that the change will threaten their position within that structure.
So within the corporate hierarchy, we may be threatened by change. Gee, if we're doing this certain thing, am I losing my power? Do I feel I'm losing my power, or am I actually losing my power and authority? Is workplace change being driven because we're really downsizing and we're not telling anybody? Yeah. Lots of issues like that, lots of fears. Other challenges or issues, yes?
People feel they're not going to be engaged with that change, that will be done to them rather than with them.
Very good point. People feel that change is going to be done to them rather than having them be a part of it, being engaged. We see that all the time. Yes, did I see a hand?
Yeah, I see the resistance to change is huge, and it's across a whole range of reasons for it. And I think it's because people, sometimes it's...
Are going to respond the way they want. And trying to think that you're going to maybe help them out if you think you're going to need it is not going to be the way to do it. So we look at this evolution of change management, where in the past we may have been helping a client right before they moved into the new work environment, where now clients are reaching out a year and a half to 2 years before their lease expiration saying, we want to prepare our people now. We need to. And it's not just about changing for the work environment. It's like, how do we get change-ready people in general? Because our competition's changing, we're going global, technology is reducing our market share, whatever it is, companies are going through significant change. So this guy, get back to your desk. That was then. What are some of the things that were impacting change, years ago? Well, we saw some of these recurring themes. A couple of these I mentioned when we were looking at leaders, but we looked at some of the things we talked about early. Perception that workplace changes are purely cost-cutting measures. We're going to protect the status quo. People are competitive, they're territorial. I need to mark my space. I have to have my name on that space. I need my family photos in that space. And back in those days, people would be told, here's what the new workplace strategy is, hope you're going to like it, because it is what it is. We're seeing, because of some of the impacts on people adopting change, how that really, really can impact business, that things need to be different now. We're seeing the younger generation that are saying, I will not work like this. I don't even want to come to work for a company that doesn't have state-of-the-art technology. I don't want to work in a sea of gray cubicles. I don't want this, and I'm not going to accept it. Yet you have the baby boomers that are retiring in waves that HR people are really nervous that they're not going to find replacement for this top talent. One of the things that's different today than before is an emphasis on productivity. An emphasis on productivity, and people scratching their heads about what is productivity. Can we measure it? When should we measure it? And how will we know if we're successful? Well, before we look at today's productivity, let's go back a few years. I've got a shot from one of my favorite movies. Anybody know who this is and what the movie was? Charlie Chaplin. Movie? Anybody know? The movie in 1936 was Modern Times. Charlie Chaplin worked in a factory, He actually got caught in the machine, so one of the big gears, which was very symbolic. It was about the Great Depression and recovering from the Great Depression and the employee against the employer, and employees were an extension of the machine, okay? The machines didn't run, there were no robotics, so the machines didn't run unless the person cranked it. So essentially, Charlie was a member of the, a part of that machine, an extension of the machine. Employees did not have a voice. You know what? We just came out of the Depression. You should be lucky to have a job working at the factory here. And people didn't know any better. That was like, okay, well, I'm going to work. I've got my lunch. I'm going. Just tell me what to do. Tell me how many times to crank it. The emphasis was on productivity and efficiency. However, it was very tangible. How many times did you crank the crank? How many widgets came out at the end of the conveyor belt? It's different now. It's confusing now. How do you measure what's coming out of somebody's brain and how much that's contributing to the organization? We still have factories, but do we have employees today in the office environment that are just an extension of the office furniture or the walls? We think people need to be tethered to the workplace. Why? Why is it? Why is that? I wonder if Charlie Chaplin had the guts to ask for a flexible work arrangement, what would the answer have been? It's like, boss, can I work at home 2 days a week, or can I come in at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock? Why couldn't Charlie, seriously, why couldn't Charlie have been in a flexible work arrangement in the Modern Times movie? The machinery's there. People had to start at the same time. I couldn't come in late because the person that was in front of me in the line, they did one thing, I did the next thing, I did the next thing. We all had to go to lunch at the exact time. We had to punch the time clock to prove it. You couldn't have flexibility, but now why don't you have flexibility? Who cares? We don't need to be in the office connected to a machine. Even some of the traditional office equipment with typewriters or, fax machines, it's like, do it from your laptop. You can be anywhere. Yet, you think of the attitudes of managers that, no, I need my people right here. I need to see. My power is by how many people are surrounding me in the workplace. Well, if I'm the manager and all of a sudden my people are at home, it's like, gee, am I even needed? Do they need me here? Because my people aren't here. They're not really leaning on me. Well, not physically, but managing in new ways, you need to be the coach. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure that I'm being sensitive to 15 minutes. Okay. So this whole issue of flexibility, which is enabled tremendously by technology, is also being hindered by leadership behavior. Doing things like productivity studies before and after a workplace change can help identify areas that have improved to prove that the workplace strategy was successful. You need to get, if you're in that industry or in that role where you're developing a workplace strategy, don't you want to get credit for doing a great job? So doing things like work time studies before and after a workplace change can look at areas to have the ammunition of what went well, but also look at areas as like, wow, I think we don't have enough concentration space. To look at those kind of elements. Some of the research studies that corroborate what Stegmeier Consulting has looked at is looking at people that are working flexibly. So be that telework, flex work, mobile work, whatever the term you want to use, that individuals that are working flexibly are working 34 to 91% of them are working more in the evenings, 15 to 82% are working more on weekends, 42 to 81% say they're working earlier in the day. The one phenomenon that we've seen over and over and over again is people that are teleworking, working at home, typically start their workday the same time they would get in their car to drive to work. So if I was going to start work at 8:30 in the morning, maybe I get in my car at 7 a.m. I would, just out of habit, I would start working at 7 a.m. That's added time. I'm going to show you some statistics that you can play with within your own organization. But there's some astounding statistics out there, from 20% to 45% or more in terms of how much productivity can increase because of that flexibility. Having the environment to support employees when they're in the office, but also having the policies and the attitude and the culture to support the flexibility. I'm going to quickly breeze through this in essence of time, but with one of our clients that had adopted a new alternative workplace strategy, we found through the Worktime studies that managers actually had a decrease of interruptions following the workplace change, a decrease of 41.2%. Hey, who wouldn't like fewer interruptions? You can get more out of your own tasks. Often managers say, it was like, when am I going to do my own work? Because employees are asking questions, their boss is asking questions. These same studies showed a reduction in the length of meetings. Who wouldn't want shorter meetings? And the one that I think is remarkable and sounds small, but it's huge. Non-managerial study participants logged an average of an additional 20 minutes of planning, goal setting, and strategizing per day. So these are the individual contributors that are expected to be more accountable, to have better decision-making skills on the front line. We're spending an additional 20 minutes to plan what they were working on, to set goals, and to strategize about their particular role and how it impacted the customer. Now, in the workplace world with architects and designers and corporate real estate, people's like, oh yeah, that's nice. Get in front of HR, it's like, wow, we're trying to get these people to develop. Oh, this is great. So, quickly here, so we can make it through all these other great speakers. If you look at the math, let's assume that one of your employees, now if it's Saint-Gobain, one employee is not, proportionally it's not a big number, but one of your employees is a teleworker and they work an average of 37.5 hours per week. That person, when you take away their paid holidays and bank holidays, they end up with about 45.9 work weeks per year. Okay? That's the time that they can actually do stuff to contribute to your organization. So let's assume, let's be realistic. That employee does not work in the evenings. They're not working on the weekends, but they're going to start working the same time that they usually walk out the door to get in their car. Okay? Very, very conservatively, they're going to save 6 hours per week. Now, I would think that in London that they might save a little bit more than that in commuting. But we want to be conservative. Whenever you're showing statistics, as ammunition for your business case, you want to be conservative because then you're going to shine when you exceed that. But that one employee has gained 275 hours or more over the course of a year, or a minimum of 7 weeks. Is there anybody that wouldn't like to gain 7 weeks of time to work on the things that are important to your job? And even if you didn't give back 6 hours a week to your work and only gave back 3 hours to the company, wouldn't you like 3.5 weeks to to contribute to your work-life balance? And that's not a small number. Let's look at a bigger number. Okay. Let's look at an organization that has a workforce of 1,500 people, and 2% of those individuals are flex, mobile, or teleworkers. Okay, 30 employees. Still a small conservative number. Based on those same calculations we just looked at, that those 30 employees would equal a gain of 8,250 hours a year, or 220 weeks. What that translates to is having 4.8 full-time employees, extra people to do work. It's hard to argue when you're saying, hey, here's our new workplace strategy, we're going to incorporate telework, and here's what we're expecting on a very conservative basis. Take this a little bit further, but still conservative. If you have an organization of 12,500 people and only 4%, small number, 4% are going to be mobile. Based on these same calculations, that those 500 employees would equal a gain of 137,500 hours, or approximately 3,667 weeks, which means it's an equivalent of 80 additional full-time employees.